My hands trembled as I watched my entire family celebrate my cousin Rebecca inheriting our grandmother's fortune. They had no idea I owned the mansion they were partying in. For 3 years, I had let them believe I was just a broke gas station attendant while secretly building my empire. Tonight, as they mocked my uniform and laughed about my minimum wage job, I was about to reveal the truth that would shatter everything they thought they knew about our family hierarchy. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this absolutely wild family revenge story, I need to know, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. If you are ready to hear how I went from family disappointment to ultimate boss move, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory. You will not believe what happens when the truth finally comes out. Let me take you back to where this all started. 3 years ago, when I was 25, my life looked like a complete disaster from the outside. I was working at Murphy's gas station on the outskirts of town, wearing that hideous red uniform that smelled like motor oil no matter how many times I washed it. My family, particularly my Aunt Margaret and her precious daughter Rebecca, never missed an opportunity to remind me of my place in our family's social hierarchy. "Sarah, honey, are you still pumping gas?" Aunt Margaret would ask every single family, gathering her voice, dripping with fake concern. "I just worry about your future, sweetie. Rebecca just got promoted to senior marketing manager at that big firm downtown. Maybe she could put in a good word for you in their mail room." Rebecca would giggle behind her manicured hand, adding her own little digs. "Oh, Mom, Sarah probably likes the simple life. Not everyone can handle corporate pressure like we can." What they did not know was that I had been playing the longest con of my life. That gas station job, it was just my cover story. In reality, I had inherited a small trust fund from my grandfather when I turned 18, money that nobody knew about because he had specifically requested it remain confidential until I decided otherwise. Instead of blowing it on cars and parties like most teenagers would, I had invested every single penny. I started small, buying a tiny duplex in a rough neighborhood and fixing it up myself. I learned plumbing from YouTube videos, taught myself electrical work, and spent my weekends covered in paint and sawdust. When I sold that first property for double what I paid, I knew I had found my calling. But I kept working at the gas station because it was the perfect cover. Nobody expects a gas station attendant to be a real estate mogul. Over 3 years, I had flipped 17 properties. I owned a portfolio worth over $2 million, including the crown jewel, a gorgeous Victorian mansion in the historic district that I had been renovating for 8 months. The same mansion where Grandmother Rose had lived before she moved to the nursing home. The cruel irony was not lost on me. My family had always assumed that when Grandmother Rose died, her will would leave everything to Aunt Margaret's side of the family. They had spent years kissing up to her, visiting her in the nursing home with expensive flowers and fake smiles. Meanwhile, I genuinely loved spending time with Grandma Rose. I would bring her homemade cookies and listen to her stories about the old days, never expecting anything in return. But here is where the story gets really twisted. Last month, Grandma Rose passed away peacefully in her sleep. The will reading was scheduled for today, and my entire extended family had gathered at what they believed was still Grandma's empty mansion. Aunt Margaret had somehow gotten the keys from the estate lawyer and decided to throw a celebration party before the official reading. I had been watching from my car across the street for the past hour, seeing my cousins, aunts, uncles, and their friends streaming into my house with bottles of champagne and party supplies. They were literally celebrating their anticipated inheritance inside the home I had purchased and renovated with my own money. My phone buzzed with texts from my cousin Rebecca. "Sarah, you should totally come to Grandma's house. We're having a little memorial party before the will reading tomorrow. Oh, wait, you're probably working tonight, right? LOL. Don't worry, we'll save you some leftover pizza." The disrespect was astronomical. They assumed I was too poor and too irrelevant to attend, even though this was supposed to be honoring our grandmother's memory. But the real kicker was what I discovered next. I had been having some electrical work done on the mansion, and the contractor had installed a temporary security system that sent alerts to my phone. That is how I knew exactly when my family had broken into my house. But the security cameras also picked up their conversations, and what I heard made my blood boil. I cannot wait to sell this old dump, Rebecca was telling her boyfriend Jake as they walked through my beautifully restored living room. The real estate market is insane right now. We could probably get $2 million easy for this place. What about Sarah? Jake asked. Doesn't she get anything? Aunt Margaret's laugh echoed from the kitchen. Oh, honey. Grandma Rose barely tolerated Sarah. That girl has been nothing but an embarrassment to this family. Working at a gas station at her age? Please. Rose left everything to Rebecca because she actually made something of herself. I sat in my car listening to them trash talk me while literally standing inside my own house planning to sell my property out from under me. But the final straw came when I heard Uncle David's voice joining the conversation. You know what the funniest part is, he said. Sarah actually thinks she's getting some inheritance. She called me last week asking about the will reading. I told her not to get her hopes up, but I think she's expecting some grand gesture from beyond the grave. They erupted in laughter. My own family was not just dismissing me. They were actively mocking the idea that I deserved any respect or consideration. These people had spent years making me feel small, treating me like the family failure, and now they were partying in my house while planning how to spend money they thought they were about to inherit. That was when I realized that tomorrow's will reading was going to be even more satisfying than I had originally planned. Because not only was I about to reveal that I owned this house, I was also about to drop the bombshell that would destroy their assumptions about everything. I decided to make my entrance during the peak of their celebration. Through the security app on my phone, I could see about 30 people spread throughout my house, drinking expensive wine and treating my furniture like it was their personal playground. Rebecca was holding court in the main living room, talking loudly about her plans to redecorate once she inherited the place. The first thing I am doing is ripping out all this old-fashioned woodwork, she announced, gesturing dismissively at the hand-carved crown molding that had taken me weeks to restore. This Victorian stuff is so dated. I am thinking clean lines, modern fixtures, maybe some exposed brick. My jaw clenched as I watched her criticize work that I had poured my heart and soul into. Every detail of that house had been carefully researched and authentically restored. I had spent countless hours matching original paint colors and tracking down period-appropriate hardware. To hear her talk about destroying it all for some generic modern makeover was like listening to someone plan to burn down a museum. I took a deep breath, straightened my gas station uniform, and walked up to my own front door. The irony of wearing my work clothes to enter my mansion was not lost on me. I rang the doorbell and waited. Jake answered the door, clearly confused. Sarah? What are you doing here? I thought you had to work tonight. I got off early, I said sweetly, stepping past him into my own foyer. I hope you do not mind that I let myself in. After all, this is a family gathering. The conversations gradually died down as people noticed my presence. I could feel their judgment washing over me. Here I was, the family disappointment in my wrinkled uniform, crashing their elegant memorial party. Aunt Margaret approached me with that condescending smile I knew so well. Oh, Sarah, sweetie, you really should have gone home to change first. We're trying to keep this somewhat upscale, you know, for Grandma Rose's memory. Actually, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet room. I think Grandma Rose would appreciate authenticity over appearances. She always valued hard work and honesty. Rebecca snorted from across the room. Easy to say when you have never had to worry about professional image. Some of us have reputations to maintain. That was my opening. I pulled out my phone and opened the real estate app that showed my property portfolio. Speaking of professional image and reputations, I think there might be some confusion here that I need to clear up. Uncle David joined the circle forming around me. Confusion about what Sarah look I know tomorrow is going to be disappointing for you, but you need to be realistic about your expectations. I smiled, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline I got whenever I was about to close a big deal. Actually, Uncle David, I think you are the one who needs to adjust your expectations. You see, there is something important that all of you should know about this house. What are you talking about? Aunt Margaret asked, her tone sharpening. I held up my phone, showing the property deed that I had pulled up. This house, the house where you are all currently celebrating, does not belong to Grandma Rose's estate anymore. It has not belonged to her for 8 months. The room went dead silent. Rebecca was the first to find her voice. That is impossible. Grandma Rose has lived here for 40 years. She lived here for 40 years, I agreed. But 8 months ago she sold it. And guess who bought it? I turned my phone around so they could all see the deed clearly displayed on the screen, my name listed as the current owner. I did. I bought this house from Grandma Rose, and I have spent the last 8 months renovating every single room you are standing in. The reactions were immediate and dramatic. Jake actually dropped his wine glass, sending red liquid splattering across my restored hardwood floors. Aunt Margaret's face went through about 6 different shades of red before settling on a color that reminded me of a ripe tomato. "This has to be some kind of mistake," Rebecca stammered, grabbing my phone to examine the deed more closely. "There is no way you could afford this place. You work at a gas station." "I do work at a gas station," I confirmed cheerfully. "But apparently you all forgot to ask what else I might be doing with my time. Turns out pumping gas during the day leaves plenty of hours for building a real estate empire." Uncle David was shaking his head in disbelief. "Sarah, even if this is real, how could you afford to buy a house worth over $1 million? Did you rob a bank?" I laughed, genuinely amused by his assumption that crime was more plausible than me being successful. No robbery required, Uncle David. Just smart investing, hard work, and compound interest. You know all those boring financial concepts. You all warned me I was too simple to understand. The crowd was buzzing now, people whispering to each other and staring at me like I had just announced I was from Mars. I could see phones coming out as people started Googling my name and cross-referencing property records. Aunt Margaret was not going down without a fight. "Even if you somehow managed to buy this house, you have no right to let us believe it still belonged to Rose. We have been planning our inheritance around this property." "Actually," I said, my voice getting colder, "you have been planning to inherit property that was never going to be yours in the first place. And you have been doing it while simultaneously trashing me at every family gathering for the past 3 years. But here is the part that really gets me. You are having this conversation while standing uninvited in my house." That was when Rebecca's boyfriend, Jake, made the mistake of trying to defend her. "Look, Sarah, I do not know what kind of game you are playing, but Rebecca has been working her ass off to build a real career. She deserves recognition for her success." I turned to face him directly. "Rebecca deserves recognition for what exactly? For getting a job that her daddy's golf buddy handed to her, for living in an apartment that her parents pay for driving a car that is still in her mother's name." Rebecca's face flushed crimson. "You do not know what you are talking about." "Don't I?" I pulled up another app on my phone, my investment tracking software. "Would you like to see what real success looks like? Because I can show you my portfolio value, my rental income, my monthly profit margins. I can show you the tax returns that prove I made more money last year than your entire family combined." The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear the gears turning in everyone's heads as they tried to reconcile the image of me they had carried for years with the reality standing in front of them. But I was not done yet, because the biggest revelation was still coming, and it was going to change everything they thought they knew about our family dynamics forever. The immediate aftermath of my revelation was chaos. Half the party guests started making excuses to leave clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding before their eyes. The other half seemed rooted in place, fascinated by the spectacle. But what happened next surprised everyone, including myself. My cousin, Michael Uncle David's son, who had always been quieter than the rest of the family, slowly walked over to where I was standing. He had been watching the whole confrontation from the corner, and now he approached me with an expression I could not quite read. "Sarah," he said quietly, "can I talk to you privately for a minute?" Rebecca immediately protested. "Michael, do not let her manipulate you with whatever lies she is telling." But Michael ignored her, leading me toward what used to be Grandma Rose's study, a room I had converted into my home office. Once we were alone, he closed the door and turned to face me with an expression that was part admiration, part desperation. "I need to tell you something." He began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something about what has been happening with Grandma Rose's will and why our family has been so confident about inheriting everything." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Michael ran his hands through his hair, clearly struggling with whether to continue. My dad and Aunt Margaret. They have been working with someone at the law firm handling Grandma's estate. They think they have arranged for the will to be modified. Modified how? I asked, though I was already starting to piece together the implications. They found out that Grandma Rose was starting to show signs of dementia in her final months. Nothing severe, but enough that they could potentially challenge her mental capacity for any decisions she made during that time, including the sale of this house to you. The room started spinning. Are you saying they are planning to contest the sale? Worse than that, Michael said, his voice getting even quieter. They have been paying someone at the law firm to doctor the will. They want to make it look like Grandma Rose left specific instructions that any property sales made in her final year should be reversed, and the properties should go directly to Rebecca as the responsible heir. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Michael, what you are describing is fraud. That is a serious crime. I know, he said miserably, and I have been keeping my mouth shut about it for months, because I was scared of what would happen to my family if I spoke up. But watching them treat you like garbage tonight and seeing how hard you have actually been working all these years, I cannot stay quiet anymore. I stared at him, trying to process this information. Do you have any proof of what they are planning? Michael nodded, pulling out his phone. I have been recording conversations for weeks. I originally planned to use the recordings to protect myself if everything went sideways, but now I think you need to hear what they have really been saying about you. He played the first recording, and I heard Aunt Margaret's voice clearly discussing their plan with Uncle David. The beauty of it is that Sarah will never see it coming. She thinks she is so smart with her little gas station job and her delusions of grandeur, but she has no idea how real estate law works. Once we prove that Rose was not competent to sell the house, Sarah will lose everything she invested in it, and we will get the property for free. Uncle David's laughter followed. Plus, she will be so financially ruined that she will probably have to move back in with her parents. Finally, she will learn her place in this family. My hands were shaking as Michael played recording after recording. They had not just been planning to steal my house. They had been actively working to destroy my entire life while pretending to care about me at family gatherings. There is more, Michael said grimly. They have also been spreading rumors about you around town, telling people that you are involved in some kind of illegal activity because there is no way a gas station worker could afford real estate investments. They are trying to damage your reputation in case you try to fight back. I felt rage building in my chest, unlike anything I had ever experienced. Michael, why are you telling me this now? Why didn't you warn me months ago? Because I was a coward, he admitted. My dad controls my trust fund until I turn 30. If I crossed him, I would lose everything. But tonight, seeing how they treated you and realizing that they are planning to commit actual crimes, I cannot be part of this anymore. I looked at Michael carefully, trying to determine whether I could trust him. What exactly are you proposing? I want to help you stop them, he said firmly. I have recordings of their conversations with the corrupt lawyer. I know the timeline of their plan, and I have access to family financial information that could be useful if you need to take legal action. This was the alliance I had not seen coming. Michael had always been the overlooked middle child, overshadowed by Rebecca's flashiness and his father's aggressive personality. But apparently he had been paying attention to everything that was happening behind the scenes. If you help me, I said slowly, you are risking everything with your family. Are you sure you are ready for that? Michael nodded without hesitation. Sarah, they are not just going after you. They have been planning to cut me out of everything too. Rebecca is supposed to inherit the bulk of whatever they can steal, and I am supposed to get just enough to keep me quiet. They have been using me as a spy this whole time, never realizing that I was keeping records of everything they said. I felt a spark of hope for the first time since Michael had started talking. What kind of records? He showed me his phone, which contained dozens of audio recordings, screenshots of text messages, and even some financial documents he had photographed when his father was not paying attention. I have been building a case file for months originally just to protect myself, but now I think we can use it to protect you too. Michael, if we do this, there is no going back. Once we expose what they have been planning, your relationship with your father and Aunt Margaret will be over. He smiled sadly. It was already over, Sarah. I just did not want to admit it. They see me as a tool to manipulate, not as family. At least with you, I know where I stand. That was when we heard shouting from the main living room. We rushed back to find Rebecca in a screaming match with someone I did not recognize, a middle-aged woman in a business suit who had apparently just arrived. You cannot just waltz in here and start making demands, Rebecca was yelling. This is a family matter. The woman in the suit noticed me approaching and walked over with a confident stride. Are you Sarah Mitchell? She asked. Yes, I am. And you are Detective Linda Harrison, Financial Crimes Division. I am here because we have been investigating reports of estate fraud involving your grandmother's will, and your cousin Michael called our tip line about an hour ago. I looked over at Michael in shock. He shrugged apologetically. I figured we needed professional help. Detective Harrison continued. We have been tracking unusual activity at the law firm of Peterson and Associates for several weeks now. When Michael provided us with his recordings, it confirmed our suspicions about a conspiracy to defraud multiple estate beneficiaries. Aunt Margaret's face had gone completely pale. I have no idea what you are talking about. Ma'am, we have recorded conversations of you discussing plans to forge documents and bribe court officials. You have the right to remain silent, but I would suggest you start thinking about cooperating with our investigation. The party guests who had remained were now scrambling for the exits, clearly wanting no part of what was about to unfold. But Rebecca was not backing down. This is ridiculous, she shouted. Sarah is obviously behind this whole setup. She is trying to frame us because she is jealous of our success. Detective Harrison looked at Rebecca with the patient expression of someone who had heard every excuse in the book. Miss Johnson, we have bank records showing payments from your mother to Thomas Peterson at Peterson and Associates. We have recorded conversations discussing the forging of legal documents. And we have testimony from multiple witnesses about your family's plans to defraud your cousin out of her legitimate property ownership. That was when Uncle David made the mistake that would ultimately seal their fate. Instead of staying quiet or asking for a lawyer, he decided to double down on their lie. You people do not understand, he said, his voice getting louder and more aggressive. Sarah has been lying to all of us for years. There is no way she could have legitimately purchased this house. She is probably involved in money laundering or drug dealing or something equally illegal. Detective Harrison raised an eyebrow. Sir, we have already verified Miss Mitchell's financial records. Her real estate investments are completely legitimate and properly documented. But your accusation of criminal activity is interesting, considering that we have evidence of actual crimes being planned by your family members. The room fell completely silent except for the sound of Uncle David's heavy breathing as the reality of their situation began to sink in. But even as I watched my family's criminal conspiracy unravel before my eyes, I knew that the most devastating revelations were still to come. Because tomorrow's will reading was going to expose secrets that would make tonight's drama look like a minor disagreement. And Michael had just handed me the perfect opportunity to ensure that justice was served with maximum impact. The next morning arrived with the weight of anticipation that had been building for months. The official will reading was scheduled for 10 in the morning at the law offices of Peterson and Associates. And despite everything that had happened the night before, my family was still planning to attend. Detective Harrison had advised me that they were allowing the reading to proceed as planned because it would provide additional evidence for their fraud case. I arrived at the law office early, wearing my best business suit and carrying a briefcase full of documents that I hoped I would not need to use. Michael had promised to meet me there to provide moral support, and I was counting on his testimony to help expose the full extent of his family's conspiracy. But when I walked into the conference room, I immediately knew something was wrong. Michael was already seated at the table, but he would not make eye contact with me. His father, Uncle David, was sitting next to him with a smug expression that made my stomach churn. Aunt Margaret and Rebecca were across the table, and they looked far too confident for people who had been threatened with criminal charges less than 12 hours earlier. The lawyer, Thomas Peterson, entered the room with a thick folder and an expression that seemed oddly nervous. Good morning, everyone. Before we begin the official reading of Rose Mitchell's last will and testament, I need to address some concerns that have been brought to my attention regarding the validity of certain property transactions. My heart started pounding. This was not how Detective Harrison had said things would go. Peterson continued, "It has come to our attention that there may have been some irregularities in the sale of Mrs. Mitchell's primary residence 8 months ago. Specifically, questions have been raised about Mrs. Mitchell's mental capacity at the time of the transaction." I shot a look at Michael, who was still refusing to meet my eyes. "What exactly are you saying, Mr. Peterson?" "I am saying, Miss Mitchell, that the family has provided medical documentation suggesting that your grandmother was suffering from dementia-related cognitive decline at the time she sold you the house. If this documentation is verified, the sale could be deemed invalid." Rebecca leaned forward with a smile that made my skin crawl. "Sarah, we are not trying to hurt you. We just want to make sure that Grandma Rose's wishes are properly honored. If she was not in her right mind when she sold you the house, then obviously that was not really her decision." I felt the walls closing in around me. "Michael," I said directly, "you know that is not true. You were there when we talked to Grandma Rose about the sale. You know she was completely lucid and enthusiastic about the transaction." That was when Michael finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my blood run cold. "Actually, Sarah," he said quietly, "I have been thinking about those conversations more carefully, and I am not sure Grandma was as clear-headed as I originally thought." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Michael had not just abandoned our alliance, he had actively joined the conspiracy against me. "Michael, what are you doing? You have recordings that prove your family was planning to commit fraud." Uncle David's smile grew wider. "Sarah, I think you misunderstood what those recordings actually contained. Michael has reviewed them more carefully, and he realizes that what you interpreted as a conspiracy was actually just our family discussing legitimate concerns about Rose's mental state." I turned to Peterson desperately. "This is insane. You cannot just decide that a legal sale was invalid because the family wants to steal the property back." Peterson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Miss Mitchell, I understand your frustration, but we have a responsibility to ensure that elderly clients are not taken advantage of. The family has provided compelling evidence that Mrs. Mitchell was not competent to make major financial decisions in her final months." That was when I realized what had happened. Somehow, between last night and this morning, Michael had been gotten to. Either they had threatened him, bribed him, or convinced him that betraying me was in his best interest. But the result was the same. My star witness had become my biggest enemy. "What kind of medical documentation?" I asked, trying to buy time while I figured out my next move. Rebecca pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "Psychiatric evaluation reports from Dr. James Morrison conducted just 2 months before Grandma Rose died. He documented significant memory loss, confusion, and impaired judgment." I opened the folder and immediately saw the problem. The reports looked official, but something about them felt wrong. The dates were suspicious, and Dr. Morrison's signature looked slightly different from one page to another. "These reports are fabricated," I said firmly. "Dr. Morrison was Grandma Rose's primary care physician, not a psychiatrist, and I have documentation showing that she passed every cognitive assessment right up until the week she died." Aunt Margaret shook her head sadly. "Sarah, honey, I know this is hard to accept, but you need to face reality. Rose was not the sharp woman you remembered in her final months. We were protecting her dignity by not discussing her decline publicly, but we cannot let her confusion be used to take advantage of her estate." The gaslighting was masterful. They had managed to flip the entire narrative, making themselves look like the protectors of an elderly woman, and me look like a predator who had taken advantage of her vulnerability. But then Michael spoke up again, and what he said made me realize that this betrayal was even deeper than I had thought. "Sarah," he said, his voice full of fake concern, "I also think you should know that Detective Harrison contacted me this morning. She said that after reviewing the evidence more carefully, they have decided not to pursue fraud charges against our family. Apparently, the recordings I provided actually support our version of events, not yours." My world was crumbling around me. Not only had Michael betrayed me, but apparently the police investigation had been dropped as well. I was sitting in a room full of people who had successfully conspired to steal everything I had worked for, and they were about to get away with it. Peterson cleared his throat. Given these circumstances, I think it would be best if we proceed with the will reading under the assumption that the house sale will be reversed. The property will be treated as part of Mrs. Mitchell's estate and distributed according to her wishes. And what exactly were those wishes? I asked, though I already knew the answer would be devastating. Rebecca's smile was triumphant. Grandma Rose left her entire estate, including the house, to me. She felt that I was the family member who best represented the values she cared about: hard work, family loyalty, and financial responsibility. The irony was suffocating. They had successfully painted me as the irresponsible family member while simultaneously committing fraud to steal my property. And somehow they had managed to turn my own ally against me. But as I sat there watching them celebrate their victory, I realized that they had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that Michael was the only person who knew about their conspiracy. They had assumed that Detective Harrison was the only law enforcement contact I had. And they had assumed that I would give up without a fight. They were wrong on all 3 counts, because while they had been busy orchestrating Michael's betrayal, I had been making preparations of my own. And the real evidence, the evidence they did not know existed, was about to surface in a way that would destroy their conspiracy completely. The will reading was about to become a confession, and they had no idea what was coming. Just as Peterson was about to begin reading the fabricated will, the conference room door opened and someone unexpected walked in. It was Dr. James Morrison himself, the physician whose name had been forged on the psychiatric reports. "I apologize for the interruption," Dr. Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority that comes from 40 years of medical practice. "But I understand that my name and professional credentials are being used in these proceedings, and I felt it was important to set the record straight." The color drained from Peterson's face. "Dr. Morrison, I was not expecting you to attend this meeting." "I am sure you were not," Dr. Morrison replied dryly. "Especially since the psychiatric evaluation reports bearing my name and signature are complete forgeries." Aunt Margaret tried to interrupt. "Doctor, surely there has been some mistake. We have your official documentation of Rose's mental decline." "Doctor." Morrison pulled out his own folder and placed it on the table. "What you have, Mrs. Johnson, are poorly crafted fakes. I am a family physician, not a psychiatrist, and I never conducted any psychiatric evaluations of Rose Mitchell. Furthermore, I have brought copies of my actual medical records for Mrs. Mitchell, which show that she was cognitively sharp and legally competent right up until her death." Rebecca was starting to panic. "This has to be some kind of mistake. Michael, tell them about the recordings." But before Michael could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Actually, let me tell you about the recordings." Everyone turned to see Detective Harrison entering the room, followed by 2 other officers, but she was not alone. Behind them walked a woman I recognized but had never expected to see in this context. It was Mrs. Patricia Williams, the elderly woman who lived next door to the gas station where I worked. I had always been kind to her, helping her with her groceries and checking on her during bad weather, but I had no idea why she would be here. Detective Harrison addressed the room. "I think there have been some misunderstandings about our investigation. Michael Johnson contacted us last night claiming he wanted to report fraud, but when we reviewed his recordings more carefully, we discovered that they actually contain evidence of criminal conspiracy by his family members." Michael started to protest. "That is not what I told you this morning." "You did not speak with me this morning, Michael," Detective Harrison said firmly. "The person you spoke with was Officer Martinez, who was conducting a separate investigation into witness tampering. Because that is exactly what your family attempted to do, tamper with a key witness in an ongoing fraud investigation." Uncle David was beginning to sweat. "Detective, I think there has been a serious misunderstanding here." "The only misunderstanding, Mr. Johnson, was your family's belief that you could intimidate Michael into changing his story. What you did not realize is that we had already secured copies of his original recordings before you got to him." Detective Harrison pulled out her own recording device. "Michael, would you like to tell your family what really happened when they visited you at 4 this morning, or should I play the recording we made of that conversation?" Michael's face crumpled as he realized he had been caught. Dad threatened to cut off my trust fund and kick me out of the family if I did not change my story, he admitted. He said that if I testified against them, they would make sure I ended up broke and homeless like Sarah was about to be. But Mrs. Williams was the one who delivered the knockout punch. "Sarah, dear," she said in her gentle voice, "I need to tell everyone something important. I have been watching your family's behavior very carefully, and I think it is time they learned who I really am." She pulled out a badge from her purse. "I am retired FBI Agent Patricia Williams, Financial Crimes Division. I moved next to the gas station 3 years ago because we had been tracking a money laundering operation that we suspected was connected to Peterson and Associates." The room went dead silent. Mrs. Williams continued, "Sarah has been unwittingly providing us with valuable information for years, just by being a good neighbor and telling me about the interesting customers who came through the gas station. But when she mentioned her family's unusual confidence about inheriting property and their hostile attitude toward her success, I began to suspect there might be a connection to our investigation." Peterson was now visibly sweating. "I have no idea what you are talking about." "Mr. Peterson," Mrs. Williams said with a sweet smile, "we have been monitoring your communications and financial transactions for 18 months. We know about the bribes you have taken to falsify estate documents. We know about the network of corrupt officials you have been working with. And we know about the other families you have helped defraud over the past 5 years." She turned to face my aunt and uncle. "What you people did not realize is that when you decided to target Sarah, you accidentally attacked someone who was under federal surveillance protection, not because she was suspected of anything, but because she was an unwitting informant in our investigation of your criminal network." Aunt Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. "Sarah was working with the FBI. "I was not working with anyone," I said, finally understanding what had been happening. "I was just being a good neighbor to Mrs. Williams. But apparently that was enough to help bring down your entire operation." Detective Harrison stepped forward. "Thomas Peterson, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of legal documents, and bribery of public officials. Margaret Johnson and David Johnson, you are under arrest as co-conspirators. Rebecca Johnson, you are under arrest for attempted theft and conspiracy." As the handcuffs came out, Rebecca made one last desperate attempt to shift blame. "This is all Sarah's fault. She must have planned this whole thing." Mrs. Williams chuckled. "Rebecca, dear, Sarah had no idea I was FBI until 5 minutes ago. The only thing she planned was to be a successful businesswoman while working an honest job. Everything else happened because your family chose to commit crimes instead of accepting that someone you underestimated had outworked and outsmarted all of you. But the biggest shock was still to come." Mrs. Williams turned to me with an apologetic expression. "Sarah, I need to tell you something about your grandmother's real will. The document Mr. Peterson was about to read is indeed a forgery, but we have the authentic will, and I think you are going to be very surprised by what it contains." She handed me a sealed envelope. "Your grandmother knew about your real estate investments. She was incredibly proud of you for building a business while staying humble and kind to your family, despite their treatment of you. She left very specific instructions about how her estate should be distributed." With shaking hands, I opened the envelope and read the real will. What I saw made me gasp out loud. Grandma Rose had left her entire remaining estate to me, along with a letter explaining that she had been secretly testing the family's character for years. She had known about their plans to contest her mental capacity, and she had deliberately sold me the house early to protect it from their schemes. But the final paragraph of her letter was what brought tears to my eyes. "Sarah, you are the only family member who visited me because you loved me, not because you wanted something from me. You are the only one who inherited my values along with my money. Use both wisely and remember that the best revenge against small-minded people is simply to live well." The criminal conspiracy that was supposed to destroy me had instead exposed itself completely. And my grandmother's final gift was not just financial security, but the knowledge that the person who mattered most had always believed in me. The courthouse steps were buzzing with media activity 6 months later as I watched my aunt, uncle, and cousin being led away in handcuffs after their sentencing hearing. The judge had not been lenient. Peterson received 8 years in federal prison for his role as the ringleader of the estate fraud conspiracy. Uncle David and Aunt Margaret each got 5 years, and Rebecca received 3 years, plus substantial financial penalties. But their legal punishment was only part of the justice that had been served. The scandal had destroyed their reputations completely. Uncle David lost his executive position and his professional licenses. Aunt Margaret was forced to sell their house to pay legal fees. Rebecca's marketing career evaporated when her employer discovered she had been involved in criminal conspiracy and no other company in the industry would hire her. Michael, who had ultimately cooperated with the investigation after his failed betrayal attempt, received probation and community service. His trust fund was frozen pending a separate investigation into whether his family had used inheritance money to fund their criminal activities, but at least he avoided prison time. Meanwhile, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The media attention around the case had been intense, but it turned out to be incredibly positive for my business. The story of the gas station worker who secretly built a real estate empire while her family plotted against her captured public imagination. I started receiving investment opportunities and business partnership offers from around the country. Mrs. Williams, who I now called Patricia, had become like the grandmother I never fully appreciated while I had her. She helped me navigate the complex legal proceedings and taught me valuable lessons about trusting my instincts when people show me who they really are. But the most meaningful change was the family I had built for myself. Michael and I had slowly rebuilt our relationship after he proved his genuine remorse through months of consistent actions rather than empty words. He had testified truthfully at every proceeding, provided additional evidence that helped prosecutors build their case, and used his own savings to hire counseling to address the toxic family dynamics that had shaped his earlier choices. Detective Harrison had become a close friend who helped me understand that standing up for myself was not just personal vindication, it was protecting other potential victims from the same criminal network. And Dr. Morrison, whose medical records had been crucial in exposing the forged psychiatric evaluations, had introduced me to his daughter Lisa, who became my business partner in expanding my real estate portfolio into medical facility development. I kept my job at the gas station for another year, partly because I genuinely enjoyed the work, but mostly because I wanted to prove that success had not changed who I fundamentally was. The owner, Mr. Murphy, eventually offered to sell me the business when he retired, and I now own a chain of 4 stations that serve as community gathering places rather than just fuel stops. The mansion that started this whole drama became my primary residence, but I also converted part of it into a resource center for young people who want to learn about real estate investing and entrepreneurship. Every month, I host workshops where people can learn the skills that helped me build wealth from nothing. Grandma Rose's final letter hangs framed in my office, reminding me daily that the best revenge against people who underestimate you is simply proving them wrong through consistent excellence. The most satisfying moment came last month when I received a letter from Rebecca in prison. She had written to apologize for everything that happened and to ask if I might consider helping her find legitimate work when she was released. The letter showed genuine remorse and accountability for her actions. I wrote back immediately, offering to provide job references and business mentorship if she was serious about changing her life. Because ultimately, my grandmother taught me that holding on to anger hurts you more than it hurts the people who wronged you. Some people asked me why I would help someone who had tried to destroy me. The answer was simple: because I could afford to be generous. When you win completely, you can choose kindness over continued revenge. That is not to say there were not consequences for their actions. They lost their freedom, their money, their reputations, and their family relationships. But once justice was served through proper legal channels, I chose to focus my energy on building something positive rather than dwelling on past betrayals. The gas station uniform I wore that night when I revealed the truth to my family now hangs in my closet as a reminder that honest work is never something to be ashamed of, regardless of what other success you achieve. And every time someone tries to make me feel small for my choices or my background, I remember that night when I walked into my own mansion wearing that uniform and changed everything. Looking back, I realized that my family did me a favor by underestimating me for so long. Their contempt motivated me to work harder, their exclusion taught me self-reliance, and their conspiracy ultimately exposed their true character while revealing mine. The little girl who used to feel hurt by their dismissive comments had grown into a woman who could not be diminished by anyone else's opinion of her worth. That transformation was worth more than any inheritance could ever be. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had family members who underestimated your potential or tried to hold you back from success? Have you experienced that sweet moment when you proved doubters wrong through your own hard work? Drop your stories in the comments below, because I love reading about other people's journeys from underdog to success story. If this family revenge story inspired you or reminded you that you are capable of more than others might think, please hit that like button to let me know. And if you want to hear more stories about people who turned their setbacks into comebacks, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that the best revenge against people who doubt you is simply proving them wrong through persistent excellence and staying true to your values no matter what obstacles you face. Thank you for watching my story, and remember, your current situation is not your final destination. Sometimes the people who believe in you least are just preparing you to appreciate those who believe in you most. Keep working toward your dreams and never let anyone convince you that you are not capable of extraordinary things.